Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to be working on Princess Peach. I am painting this for a upcoming little girl's birthday party. I'm very excited about it. I've been meaning to do a couple from the Mario franchise for a little while now, so I'm glad that I have this opportunity to get started. So I've got, like always, I've got my reference image off to the left of the screen there. And I'm going to start putting in my background, and I'm going to do this probably in a dot style. I'll decide as I get a little closer. You know how much I love my dot style. But for now, we'll go ahead and we'll put in this like soft pink background. The colors that we're going to use today are white, black, brilliant yellow, yellow ochre, light magenta, turquoise, cadmium red hue, iridescent gold, and black and white. So those are our colors. We'll probably use a 3/4 inch straight flat brush. We will probably also use a 5/8 angle brush and a 0 liner, just because it makes it a little bit easier to do the details. So we're going to be sticking mostly with a large, a medium-ish, and a small detail brush. You should probably also have on hand a hairdryer and either chalk or a chalk pencil, a cup of water, and something to dry your brushes on. Whether you're like me and you rinse them off and wipe them on your clothes, or a towel or a paper towel, and then of course something to stick your paint on. I use this little 99-cent plastic palette, but you could use paper plate, you know, just whatever you want to use. So we're going to first start with putting in our light magenta on our little palette. And also some white. And I buy, for white and black, I buy this large stuff, just because I go through a lot more of it. And I'm going to put them in 2 separate spots on here because I'm going to cross hatch my color on. So I'm going to take my flat brush, I'm going to put it in my pink, and I'm going to kind of like very purposefully go into an X and then mix in some white as I'm going. I'm trying not to put them on my brush at the same time because I want them to blend a little, but not a lot. I really want sort of like, I want you to be able to see this texture a little bit behind Peach. Now remember, her dress is pink, so you want to make sure you get enough of the white in so that it doesn't overly clash with her dress. But that is a bigger issue for at the bottom. And you don't have to necessarily make it the same shade at the top and at the bottom as I did in the reference image. Definitely feel free to tell your own story there. Or if you want to paint like a Super Smash Brothers version where there are different colors, you know, feel free to do that as well. A couple of years ago, I had actually sewn a Princess Peach dress that was a sort of sea foam and purple color for my niece's birthday party. It was very exciting. And my husband was dressed up as Purple Mario. And we're just going to continue to kind of fill in our space here. I definitely think I'm wanting it to be darker towards the top and then work my way into sort of a lighter section at the bottom. Just because that appeals to my mentality and aesthetic, but you do whatever you think is best for your painting and your mindset. And I might go ahead and lighten up my color here. And I need a little more paint on my palette. If you're wondering, I'm working on an 8x10 canvas for this particular piece. Don't get too hung up on your background, because remember, we're painting over it. This is just sort of the beginning. And don't forget your top and your sides. And because we're doing this cross-hatching technique, when you're done with the sides, make sure you kind of brush over the front too, so it kind of mixes that color back in. I'm actually going to turn my canvas upside down here in a minute, so that way I can properly get the bottom here after I get the other remaining side. And I'm going to work it into the side here, so that way it doesn't look very all of a sudden. And I'm going to flip it over. And get the bottom side. This is especially great if you don't intend to put a frame on your canvas. If you're wanting to leave it gallery wrapped, you want to make sure that your painting continues on the sides of your artwork. As a general rule, I do not frame my artwork because I like to change where they are in my room and my house a lot. And the same kind of frame may work nicely in one room, but not necessarily in another. All right, and now I'm going to go back in and just kind of add a little bit of white in some areas. Again, in that cross-hatching kind of texture way. Because I need to lighten it up a little bit. It's a little too dark. All right, and I'm going to focus a little more white here in the middle. All right, and I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm going to attack it with the hairdryer now. And for your safety of your ears, I am going to temporarily mute my mic while I dry this. All right, you'll know your painting is dry when you're looking at it from an angle, it is not shiny. You shouldn't be afraid to rub your hand all over it. Say clean. That's how you know you're dry and good to work with it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of chalk and kind of chalk in where her details are going to go. So she's got kind of an oval face. So we got to get that kind of in there. And she's got her little neck. And from the profile of this, we kind of got her front side there. And then sort of the puff sleeve there. And we'll kind of just tell the story of where that puff sleeve is going. If you're using chalk, whenever you draw a line that you don't like, you can always just use water to get rid of it. It's why I'm a big fan of doing chalk. She's got a really, really big puff sleeve, so I think I'm going to go to kind of there. And she's got her pendant, you know, that's sort of there. And then her hair, because she's got a lot of hair. Girl's got a glorious amount of hair. So it kind of goes, she's got that triangle bit, and then out this way. And for that side, it sort of kind of does this number, and it kind of comes up to there. And over here, it kind of swoops out. We don't need these lines anymore because that's where that was just to kind of place where her face was. But I do need to angle this a little bit because her face is angled, so her hair would be angled too. You want to make sure your angle kind of lines up with where your chin would be. Okay, so we've got that there. And her chin kind of comes to a bit of a point. So I'm going to thin out her chin a little bit. She don't got that. She's got a nice kind of definition to her chin. And even though her hair kind of goes off this way, and this part kind of comes to sit, because we're going to see sort of her crown go there. But it's sort of a nestled bit. So we're going to have, like, the beginning of her crown would go there. All right, so for now, that's what we're gonna worry about. We won't worry about the details of her face or anything just yet, just because we need to kind of get the basis in. Now, we're about to work with, when we do her face or hair, we'll have to paint this area white first, because trying to paint yellows, oranges, or reds over any other color, those colors are kind of transparent in a way, so they won't have good coverage unless you either mix them with white first or put a layer of white in first, whichever way you want to do that. I usually try to do add a little bit of the color I want to add in there, because it adds a little bit of extra underpainting detail. So I'm going to actually start, because it's a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and begin with the bit for her dress. So I'm going to put some more light magenta down on my palette. Oop, off it. And I'm going to start with a detail brush, because I need to kind of hammer in, because she's got parts of her dress that are that her collar is a little darker. So I'm going to put in her collar going here. And it kind of does like a little bit of a cute little scallop. So you'll just want to make little scallop shapes and then fill those in. Right, so we've got that kind of in place. And now we're going to mix with our 5/8 brush. Or no, we'll use a 4-round. I did decide I needed another brush, so a 4-round. If you've got one of those on hand, I'm going to pre-mix on my palette a shade that is slightly lighter than what here is, but is still very pink, because I definitely need to kind of differentiate between my background, and her dress is a pretty light shade still. Or rather, it needs to be kind of maybe a little bit darker. I'll put some straight on here. There we go. And I'm going to go kind of just around where that is. And we want this part here to remain a little darker, because we need the sleeve line to be noticeable compared to the rest of her dress. Right, and it's a little too light there. I've got to build out the shape of her sleeve. And I want to continue that on the side of my canvas. And now I'm going to take this slightly lighter shade and fill that space in. Because we're telling the story that the sleeve is receiving a little more light. It's more in the front. And we'll put a little more of this lighter shade kind of here too, because you want the deepest part to be sort of where that sleeve line is and at the edge. It should never feel like a harsh line though. We're just kind of telling a story about where the light is falling on this dress. And add a little more light over on this side. Okay, and a little bit of this here to kind of darken up where the sleeve is, the shadow of where that meets. And it should kind of, that shadow should extend a little this way too. And it should feel very round. And the lightest part should be in the center. There. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about my sleeve there. So I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm going to start slowly painting in areas where I need to do a layer of white first. And that includes her brooch here, because we're needing to do a little bit of our iridescent golds and then our blue. You don't got to make it perfectly white. You're just trying to create a layer for it, so that way the color can really stand out. Remember that because this is sort of a stone brooch, it will protrude. It won't lay flat, so make sure you don't do a straight line. It's not a straight line. There should be a bump there. All right, and we'll go ahead and add. And I did like angle her more, so you'll see less of her hair coming up behind her. This is intentional. I didn't want that as a design. And this section of white will be for her hair. And I will go ahead and stick some of my brilliant yellow onto my palette and mix some of that into where the hair is going to go on that layer of white. Definitely want to thank everyone who came out to the hometown market yesterday. It was so nice to see so many of you. Right, so we've got our first little bit of yellow, and now I want to show you what would happen if you tried to just paint yellow. See, here you can still see the pink underneath. This is the reason why we go ahead and put in a layer of white first. It gives it a layer to bounce on. And we'll finish putting her hair in, or at least blocking out where her hair goes. There is obviously some behind her hair there too, but I don't want to put that in just yet. I want to wait to do that until after I've done her face, because I want the hair that's behind her main front there to be a darker shade, and the directionality of it will be different too. And I want to make sure it shows up behind her earrings and ear when I paint that in. And whenever you're worried about your hand going in your paint, you know, you can go ahead and turn your canvas around to whichever point would mean that your wrist was not touching your artwork. If you're finding you're unable to do that, it would be a good point to stop and dry your artwork before continuing. And there is no shame in having to stop to do that. And we're still just kind of color blocking in her hair here, creating that base layer, so that way the yellow can really show and adhere. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and start working in some of my yellow. There will be another layer, and we'll add some yellow ochre into this to create some dimension for her hair. But we're just getting our base layer in. We definitely want to make sure to be careful to not extend past where your white is, since you're using that as your guideline for the shape of her hair. So if you need more control at the edge, switch to a smaller brush. All right, we're almost done color blocking in her hair, and then we'll start color blocking in her face. I will create a traceable that I'll upload to Patreon if you are not confident in your drawing ability. To get the traceables, it is just $1 a month. You would get access to every traceable for every video I've ever made. And while I've got the yellow here, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick second layer on this part. Okay, so we've got the basis of our hair in there for the most part, with the exception of the bit that goes here, but we're going to do that later. All right, now Peach's face is, well, very peach. So we are actually going to use more or less a very, very, very light shade of pink for her face. So we're going to go ahead, because we're going to mix a whole lot of white and pink together. We shouldn't really need to do a base layer because it's going to be principally white with just a little bit of pink in there. Like for reference, for my mixing, I've started with literally that much white to that much pink. And I'm probably still going to have to add more white because it's still way too pink. So I'm going to put more white on my palette. It's still way too pink. So what I think I'm going to do is I'll paint it all white and then mix in a little bit of the color I've got going on here as I'm going. just because there is so much pink. And I'm still using my one round because I don't want to mess up the lines I've already made for myself. And here I'm put in a little bit of that super light pink, and I'm going to add a little more white into it. You have to think about, as you're putting your brush strokes down, where the light is hitting her face, or it's hitting her face here. So all your brush strokes should be angling in from all the directions towards the center. So when you're doing here from her chin, you're going to be working towards the center here. It's important that you always maintain the light source. Otherwise, when you're finished, you'll wonder why your painting looks odd. And it'll be because either you abandoned or paid no attention to your light source. And I'm probably going to take just a hint of the yellow I used from her hair to mix it into the color with the pink for what I'm using for her face, to try and get kind of an apricot color going on. So we've got our base layer, and I'm going to stick just a littlest bit of this yellow in here and kind of really work it in. And we'll take that tiny bit of that super light pink and work that in as well. And we will get something resembling a pale skin tone. And by working the pink back in, we're also kind of giving her skin that natural, like, rosy glow to it that appears in this reference image. Okay, and I'm gonna kind of touch up my sides here, because that should be the darkest point on her face, is at the sides. And then we're going to stick a little bit more white here in the very center, because there will be more light in that spot. Because it's the very center of her face and it is the focal point. So it should have more lightness there. Okay, so we've got that in. I'm going to rinse my brush. And now I'm going to do her neck. And her neck should be a little darker than her face because it's kind of shadowed underneath. So I'm going to take that super light pink I made and fill that in there. And you'll take a little bit of your yellow and kind of mix that in too. Okay, so we've got our neck in. And actually, it should go a little straighter there, because of the way her face is. It should go straighter there. So make a quick correction. And at this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and define where her ear is going to be. Her ear is just below here. And she's got a little tiny ear, so I think her ear is going to be kind of this. Well, maybe extend a little bit. So again, I'm going to use that light pink I made. Add a little tiny bit of my yellow to it. And I'm going to use a little more white towards the center of the ear. And now we're going to go ahead and lay out where that side bit of her hair comes down. So it kind of goes alongside, almost alongside her face a little bit. It kind of goes to there. And it kind of tapers. So I'm going to fill that area with white and then go over it with my yellow. Actually, it looks like it kind of almost goes to her neck, so I'm going to extend it a little bit. So we've kind of got that there going on, and we'll go ahead and put in the spot for where that blue earring is going to go. And it's going to kind of hang as a big circle just below her ear. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in white. It got away from me a little bit and lost the pretty round shape. So while it's still wet and the background is dry, I'm just going to kind of smear it off there. And I'm going to put a little bit of turquoise on my palette. We won't need a whole lot of this since we only will really be using it for her pendant and in her earrings and a little in her crown and eyes. So you won't need a whole lot of this. And just as a reminder, this is a turquoise. And I'm going to go in with my zero detail brush and clean up my outer line a little bit. All right, so we've kind of got that placed in. And now that we kind of know where her ear and whatnot is going, we'll go ahead and place in the rest of her hair. So it's going to kind of go off from over here and it's just going to go out. It goes off the canvas. I think this is a good time to clean up any lines that you didn't like in that area. You can just cover them with white. And I'm doing the side of my canvas where it kind of comes off of the side, because it's continuing to flow off the canvas. Gonna make sure we don't chop up the ear we just made unless you need to make a correction there. Okay, we're almost done kind of blocking in this behind, behind her neck hair. This part will be a little darker. That's what we have the yellow ochre for. We're going to use this sort of closer to here and then go back out to that pretty yellow. And we'll use a little bit of this too when we're defining out more of her hair down the line. So we'll go ahead and put in our yellow ochre. And it's kind of mixing in to our white so that it is a less like hostile deep shade of yellow so that it looks more natural. I did clean up a little my blue line there, so it did smear a little, but that's okay. I can do that cleanup when it dries. Right, and I'm going to do off the side of the canvas. And I'm going to add some of that pretty brilliant yellow in towards the side here. Okay, and now I'm going to add some more of that pretty brilliant yellow up here in the top as a second layer to finish covering up that pink from where we put in our backgrounds. It should be hyper pigmented. I need to put a little more paint on my palette. And another quick little layer over here. Right, and while I've got it kind of wet, I'm going to mix in a little bit of that yellow ochre just in a couple of places to create a little bit of dimension, because your hair is not like one solid color. There is some variation in it. Even when you dye it, the sun adds it back. Or at least it does always for me. And add a little bit over here. And a little down here. And this part should be a little darker just because it's kind of away from the front of the light source. Sort of like how over here will be a little darker. Okay, so we've got kind of the basis for that of our hair in. We'll go ahead and put in, I need to rinse my brush a little more. There we go, much better. All right, we're going to kind of put the concept of where our blue is going to go. It'll come right all up to the edge. And then we got to leave some room for the setting. There we go. And I'm going to put a little bit of white in the center because I think that the stone has a little bit of light going on it. And maybe just a little touch more in the very center. And I'm going to stick some of my iridescent gold kind of going around so that way we've kind of framed out her brooch. I'm going to switch over to my detail brush for that because that area is kind of narrow. If you don't have gold iridescent, you can use the yellow ochre diluted down with white to get sort of a goldish color. It just won't be shiny. All right, so we've kind of got our brooch nice and filled in. All right, let's continue on. We kind of got our crown left to go. We'll do a very similar style as we did for our brooch there. I'll use my 4 round and kind of fill in the crown, and don't forget to extend up to the top, up and over your canvas. Right, so we've got kind of our crown in. And we'll use just that little sliver of cadmium red hue for just that touch of that red jewel that's in the front. I'm going to use my 0 brush for this. All right, so it will kind of go like this. We'll definitely have to do multiple layers here to get this a nice, like, pretty red. So don't worry about getting it perfect. We're definitely going to be going over it. And just as with the brooch and the earring, we've got a little bit of one up here on the side. And it's going to protrude just a tiny bit because it's sort of the side of her crown. And we don't really see enough of the other side in the reference, but because of the way I did mine, you do. So I'm going to go ahead and put it over on this side as well. Again, it'll need another little touch-up of color. And, you know, while I'm thinking about it, let me go ahead and touch up these down here for the earring, because I did not give it a light source. So let me do that real quick. Okay, I'm going to switch back over to my 4 rounds and use my gold to start filling in her crown a little bit. All right, and now we're going to do the other side. Okay, that'll be our base layer. We'll have to go back over that again. but that will get us started. And at this point, I need to dry my canvas. At this point, I'm going to go in and add the remainder of that little bit of hair on this side. I just didn't want to stick my wrist down into my paint. All right, so after it kind of goes off to the side, it does kind of go a little down the side of her face. We'll have it mirror that side because she wouldn't have a lopsided haircut. And it's a little thinner, but it'd be like this. We're just telling about her little wispies there. She's got little wispies. So we're putting it in white first, and then we'll go over it in the yellow. And I'll go ahead and touch up this one over here while I'm right here, because it needs a little more yellow. Yeah. Okay. And there's a sliver of that earring hanging out the side, so we'll go ahead and add that in. Not a lot showing, but just enough for us to know that it is there. Right, and now we're going to start kind of putting in her face. And I'm going to bring back up my chalk pencil for this. All right, so she's got kind of, her nose is very central and it's very small and pert. And her eyes are kind of a soft round there. And she's got cute little lips there. Little lips. All right, so we'll go ahead and start kind of thinking about how we're going to put this in. So I'm going to use my yellow ochre real quick and just stick in her little tiny eyebrows that are way up here. And on the other side, in the same place. She's got little tiny eyebrows. All right, her upper eye is rimmed in black. So I'm going to take my black, and because I'm going to use so little of this, I'm just going to use it directly out of the cap rather than put it on my palette. And I'm going to trace the upper plan for where her eye is. It's going to be a little thicker than that, but for now, let's just get it in there. Because for her, it's actually kind of an eyeliner. Okay, so we've got the upper eye on that side, and it's not a good way for me to do it without getting my hand in the paint. Do my points. Okay, and thicken out our line. And thicken out our line. Okay, so we've got our upper part of her eye in. It really is more round than that, though. Let me kind of round that off. Make a quick little correction. Spot correction. And I will use my pink, the light pink that I mixed when doing her face, which should be slightly darker than what's on there, to kind of do the under eye, just so that way I know where it begins and ends. Right, so we've got our eye in there. And I'll use that same pink for her nose. And it's just sort of a little... It's sort of like a little triangle, really. Kind of goes like that, and it kind of feels a little lighter there, and then it goes into like a lighter shade just on the other side of it. We're just kind of telling like just a little quick hint of the fact that she's got a little bit of a nose there. Just a little. And by putting a little white on one side of it, we're casting a shadow. And it's indicating the kind of height for us. We'll go ahead and fill it in with white. And then fill in the other eye. And then we'll put in the blue of her eye. And she's got pretty big irises that kind of fill the whole space. So we'll do this. And that. Kind of fill that in. You want to do this in a circular motion so that way any brush strokes can be attributed to the innard of her eye. You'll want to add a little bit of white and kind of work it into that circular motion to give her eyes some light and shine, because, well, your eyes are not all one color either. And because of the way she's looking, most of her eye will be more towards the inside here. Like that. Again, just kind of working the paint into a circle and adding a little bit of white, working that in. All right, let's go ahead and put in the black on her eyelashes while we wait for that area to dry a little bit. She's got kind of a spiky eyelash. It's very long and noticeable. You want to make sure they're always kind of radiating away from the eye, not always straight up, just whatever way is straight out from your black line. So we got kind of our eyelashes in. We'll go ahead and put in black dot for her pupil. Nope. And kind of overlapping all of that, we'll do a little white dot, kind of overlapping some of the black and some of the blue. Kind of telling a little story about the light hitting her eye. And I'm going to put a couple of little light dots in there. They didn't do this in the reference image, but her eyes should sparkle a little bit. And now she's got that cute little like pop nose or mouth, and to get kind of that right shape, I'm actually going to draw a heart. Because that will give me her upper lip, and then I can use that line to kind of thin it out a little bit. And I'm going to take some of my regular straight hot pink and work it in. And kind of go just around the edges of where I've made my lips. And across the center. And it's got kind of a darker center there. I'm guessing where maybe it's probably like her lips are puckered there. And we'll extend the side of her mouth out just a little. So that way it can indicate that she's kind of smiling. All right, so we've got our kind of our basis in there. Now we're going to go ahead and finish doing some touch-ups and adding a little bit of detail. So I'm going to take my 5/8 angle brush. And in her hairline, I'm just going to do a couple little dashes of my straight yellow, kind of following her hairline. I'm just kind of texturizing her hair a little bit. And I'm using the angle on the angle brush to help kind of with the lines. Alrighty. And I'm going to do the same thing with our yellow ochre. Just a couple of little lines, creating a little bit of texture. And I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush to do the same kind of here on her face. Another little layer of the gold and the red up at the top for my crown. Oh, and I guess a little bit of the blue too. The blue needs a little bit of a touch up. Oh, I also need to create a little bit of a shadow in the center of the ear. Yeah. And touch up the jewel on this side. And I'm going to put a little bit more there closer to where her hair is, a little more of that yellow ochre. All right, now I'm going to take some of my golds and work in another layer of gold in the crown. Okay, so we've got that. And I think even though it's not called out for it, I'm going to outline the earring in gold too. Just because the brooch is, the crown is, it just, to me, it makes sense. I'm also going to do another quick layer of the gold down here on the brooch, just to make sure it's super shiny. And I don't think I'm going to do this one in a dot style. I think I'm going to leave it more as is, although I am going to lighten up, I think, a couple of areas on her dress. I'm going to take some of that light pink I made for her skin, I think, and kind of work it in. I'm going to take a little bit of water to do that so that it's super fluid. I don't think I got it light enough here, in my opinion. And take some of my darker pink and kind of work it back in. There we go. Much happier. Needed a little lighter there. Maybe just a touch more. And maybe a little touch more over here too. Round brush. Kind of work the detail in. There, now I'm much happier with it. I think I'm ready to go ahead and sign it. And I'm going to sign it, I think, in white, since I have some of that left over. Alrighty, we are in good shape. Then you would just want to dry it before you hang it. Thank you for coming and hanging out at the easel with me. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.